So up next, we have Alice Leung talking about generative AI as a tool to study fan fiction, fictional facts, feelings, and ships.
Hi, I'm Alice Leung, and I am a lead scientist at RTX BBN Technologies. I'm not a fan fiction scholar, but I am here to talk to you about using generative AI as a tool to study fan fiction. I'm hoping some of you out there are fan fiction scholars and might want to collaborate and might consider using generative AI as a tool. So first, what we will talk about today and what we won't talk about today. I cannot cover the ethical and social implications of using generative AI to write your papers, make pictures, or crank out amateur novels in minutes. And I'm also not going to talk about the ethical or intellectual property issues around using content from the internet to train AI models. And I am not going to take a position on the one true pairing. But I will give you a few ideas for how generative AI might be useful in fan fiction studies. First, what is a large language model? These large language models are a type of generative AI, and what they do is they predict the most likely next piece of text that is going to follow a whole bunch of other text. So they have been trained on a huge amount of sample text. An LLM does not actually know anything. We might treat it like it knows things, but it knows no facts and it performs no logic. It is all a statistical analysis process. And it turns out that if you ingest enough data, you can, if you're an LLM, respond as if you might understand questions. Many of you have probably heard of ChatGPT. That's one well-known chatbot that is built on top of an LLM. GPT-4 is one version of an LLM that's been used to power such chatbots. But I will say that most chatbots add some extra training on top where they're not just trained on the raw text, but they're also trained to produce results that please people. I am a researcher in human behavior. I am interested in large language models because, to some extent, they reflect humanity, or at least the part of humanity that is text on the internet. Now, we've looked at it for things like, what might people do in moral dilemmas? But it turns out that the internet is not a representative sample of all human behavior. But I would assert that actually the internet is a pretty representative sample of fan fiction. So if you want to see what fan fiction thinks about Harry Potter issues, using a large language model is not a bad way to aggregate all of that, because we know that these models have been trained on things like AO3. So I would assert that what a large language model answers when you ask it Harry Potter-related questions and give it Harry Potter-related prompts actually does reflect what fan fiction writers have posted on the internet. So before you go off and you start doing this kind of research, how do you even know if an LLM has ingested enough Harry Potter content to be useful? Well, I would say that a quiz-type test is easy to write and administer. And this is important because there are a lot of different generative AI models out there, and you would probably want to pick a good one rather than a bad one if you were doing this kind of study. If it's possible, you should try to use one that has not been specialized for chat, but is just specialized for text completion. And that's because not only have chatbots been tipped to respond in a way that pleases the asker, but some of them have guardrails that are hard-coded to prevent them from leading you into trouble. But if you're studying fan fiction, you probably don't mind being led into trouble. I would also suggest that if you want to run a question only once, you should set the model parameters to always produce the most probable output. More about that later. So as a sample, I wrote a couple of basic fictional fact tests, basic knowledge about Hogwarts stuff. Who was the teacher of divination? Who was the substitute teacher when Remus Lupin was ill? And comparing the kinds of answers that you get from GPT-4, which is the most modern GPT version, versus 3.5, which was the most modern several months ago, we see that GPT-4 is better at reflecting the canonical Harry Potter facts. GPT 3.5 actually gets some things wrong. So I would say that probably 4.0 has ingested enough Harry Potter information that you could use it to study fan fiction. Now, once you've done a basic knowledge check to make sure the LLM is adequate for your needs, what would you do next? I think you want to look at things where the canon doesn't have a total answer. And you might want to look at how fandom fills in the blanks. And there's a couple of ways you could do that. You could ask quiz-style questions. You could write Drabble-type prompts and see how the LLM fills them in, or you could directly question it about fandom. And I will give you some examples of them, of these things. So Draco Malfoy's Patronus, it's not specified. It is a blank in the canon. If you just ask GPT-4 what was Draco Malfoy's Patronus, it says that it wasn't written down in the canon. But you can do this for lots of other missing facts. And I found that, interestingly, if you ask about the private room that in so many fan fictions, the head girl and the head boy have a private room so they can advance the plot, GPT-4 does actually reflect that in the answer. They start to reflect fandom. But even more interesting, you can fish with prompts, right? So you write the first part and you're like, Draco Malfoy shouts expecto patronum, and then from the tip of his wand, and then GPT-4 tells you that a ferret burst forth. So you can use this kind of Drabble method to coerce the LLM to fill in the blanks in a way that it's drawing on fan fiction, because how else would it be able to fill in these kinds of blanks? And it really produces pretty passable fan fiction that may entertain and surprise you. And you could also ask, the third method is you could ask directly, prefacing your question with in Harry Potter fandom, right? So you could say, in Harry Potter fandom, what are the most common Patronuses that are listed for Draco Malfoy? And GPT-4 knows. It could tell you it's a dragon, a ferret, a snake, or a white peacock. So the direct question, when you preface it with in fandom, actually is pretty informative. Another way you might use this tool is you could explore fandom's opinions about the characters. I mean, one of the reasons we all love these books is because it is possible to have a lot of different opinions about complex issues, and maybe you don't want to argue with the whole internet about whether you think that Dumbledore was a good person or not. Maybe you just want to argue with an LLM. So feel free to ask, right? Is Dumbledore a good person? Did Hermione really help the house elves? Who was the best defense against dark arts teacher? So this is a way that when you ask these kinds of opinion questions, the way that the LLM will answer them, it is almost certainly reflecting what fandom has said on the internet. That is the only place that it could get this kind of knowledge. And of course, fan fiction has an emphasis on different kinds of relationships. And there you can ask some Drabble-style prompts, you can ask direct questions. Let's see what it thinks. You can write a happy story of when this character finally kissed the person they'd really been looking forward to, and then you could have it fill in who that other person is. Or you could write a prompt about a doomed pairing, about how they knew all along it was just gonna be a trash fire and they were gonna be sad. And we will find that actually GPT-4 does mostly stick to canon ships when it fills in these blanks. It will pair up Harry and Ginny, and Hermione and Ron, and Remus and Tonks. But actually, when there's a blank in canon, like Sirius Black, it will fill in Remus. So we see this in the way that the major characters are paired up. We actually see that when you have a doomed pairing, that Harry is most likely be paired up with Hermione in fan fiction and not Ginny. So there can be some differences between happy and sad stories. Similarly, you can fish with these same prompts to look at minor ships. And you can see that, like many fans, GPT-4 will go to text outside of the core books and tell you who the author has said that Minerva was married to. But once in a while, it does come up with an original character. Which one? Yeah, that's the original one. Like, it just like fills in this whole thing about Amelia and her characteristics. It was like, oh, an original character came out of GPT-4, right? It just, once in a while it happens, particularly when there isn't a canonical pairing. Now you can also ask directly. You could say, hey, in Harry Potter fan fiction, which characters are most often portrayed in a romantic relationship with Harry, Hermione, Sirius? And the answers that GPT-4 comes up with, it definitely lists a lot more non-canonical pairings when asked directly about fan fiction. Interestingly, if you go into AO3 and you check out how many stories have the different tags, it doesn't always get the scale of them exactly right. I mean, there are a lot of Harry Draco stories, but it does not list Draco first, it lists Hermione first. So it's got a little bit of a bias towards the canon pairings, but it definitely knows about fan fiction pairings as well. Now, if you really want to do this, and I hope some of you will because it is really fun and interesting, you should know that most LLMs have a setting where you can make it not give you just the most probable answer, but to jiggle around a little in the most probable space. And that means you could ask it the same question 5 times or 10 times, and it won't give you the exact same answer every time. And if you do this, then you will find that 4 out of 5 times, the doomed partner for Harry is Hermione, but 1 out of 5 times, it's Cho. So you can do that kind of statistical stuff. And you know, who's Harry's godmother? Most of the time it's Andromeda Tonks. Occasionally it'll make up a whole original character, and then like Bellatrix will turn up. So I really would love it if some of you go and use generative AI to study fan fiction. You can look at the places where fanon diverges the most with canon. You can look at the divergence within the fan fiction community. And you can see which tropes are just like so popular in fan fiction that they that they direct GPT-4 in a very strong way. Computer scientists would call some of these things hallucinations, but I would say that they really are reflecting real trends in HP fandom. Feel free to email me if you want a copy of the slides, and in the backup slides I have all the outputs for all the prompts that GPT-4 writes about our favorite characters. Thank you.
Thank you very much.